This is Algebra Credit Recovery Unit 14. So it says write the function of each of the following. So looking at number 1, these functions make a U shape, and so these are quadratics. And so I'm going to write these in vertex form, which is y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. H and k are your vertex, and so that's what we'll be looking for. So my vertex is at 0, 0. And so I know my axis of symmetry is at x equals 0 because it's just the x value of your vertex. So when writing this, I don't have a stretch or shrink. So my equation is just y equals 1 times x minus 0 squared plus 0. That's how you would write it in vertex form. To simplify it, you would just say y equals x squared, and that is actually the parent function. Number 2, my vertex is at 3, 5. So my axis of symmetry is at x equals 3. I don't have a stretch or a shrink, so this is y equals x. Remember, whenever you have your vertex and you're writing it in vertex form, you have to do the opposite. So the opposite of positive 3 would be x minus 3 squared and then plus 5. Because my vertex did move from 0, 0 up to 3, 5. Number 3, my vertex here is at 0, 4. Therefore, my axis of symmetry is x equals 0. This one actually opens down, and whenever a quadratic opens down, we know that it's negative. Because I did not shift my vertex xy, so left and right, I'm just going to say x squared, but I did move it up 4. Describe the transformation from the quadratic parent function. Remember, the parent function is just y equals x squared. So when describing the change, I have plus 1. This plus 1 tells me that I went to the left 1. And then the plus 4 tells me I went up 4. Okay, so that means my vertex moved left 1 and then up 4. Number 5, this negative tells me that it reflected. It flipped, so it opened down. So we say reflected. The 2 tells me I had a stretch of 2. The minus 7 tells me I went to the right 7, and the minus 8 tells me I went down 8. So right 7 and down 8. And the last one, remember that the number in front of your x or your parentheses is a stretch or a shrink. So I had a shrink of 8, a shrink of 1/2. Okay, minus 3 tells me I went to the right 3, because you do the opposite whenever you're with the x. And plus 4 tells me I went up 4. Number 7, if the graph of the function y equals 2.7x squared plus 4 is shifted down 5 units, write the equation that would show the shift. So if we're going down, okay, that's dealing with our k value. Okay, so that's dealing with what's at the end. So that means we would just subtract 5 from our 4, and we get y equals 2.7x squared. Okay, 4 minus 5 is negative 1. Okay, so that would be our new equation. So what we would have done is, if you looked at a picture of a graph, it would have started up, and all we did was shift it down. Number 8, if the graph of the quadratic parent function is compressed by a factor of 1/3, shifted 2 units up and 6 units to the right, write the equation. So what I'm going to do is label that with my a, h, and k. So if I compress it, that's my a. If I go 2 units up, that's my k value. And 6 units right is my h value. So I'm just filling in to vertex form. So this becomes y equals 1/3. I went to the right 6, so that's going to be minus 6, and then up 2, so plus 2. Number 9, write the equation that describes the transformation of the linear parent function if it is shifted 3 units up and 4 units, or 3 units left, 4 units up, and it's made steeper by a factor of 2. So if we remember that the linear parent function is just y equals x. So if we write the transformation, if it's shifted 3 units left, 4 units up, and it's made steeper by a factor of 2, that's going to be y equals, my factor of 2 is first. Okay, 3 units to the left is going to be plus 3. Okay, this is linear, so we don't need to square it. And then it is shifted up 4 units, so plus 4. 10. How would you graph the function y equals x squared plus 3 be affected if the function were changed to y equals x squared minus 7? So whenever you're unsure about these, type it in and look at the graph. So we're going to type in x squared plus 3, and then on y2 I'm going to type in x squared minus 7. And look at the graph. So the first one is going to be x squared plus 3. And the second one is x squared minus 3. So if we notice, my first graph started up here as a y-intercept of 3, and the second graph has a y-intercept of negative 7. So this graph was shifted down 10. And if you want to sketch a picture, we know this one is up, this one was down. Okay, so you'd have to move down 10. Number 11, write a new function for g of x using the function x squared minus 7 if the function f of x, negative 7, is changed to negative 4. Okay, so our new function is going to be g of x. It's going to be the same thing, except our negative 7 is changed to a negative 4. So I'm going to say x squared minus 4 this time. 12. How does the graphs of the function f of x equals x plus 8 squared and x minus 4 squared relate to each other? So, again, if you want to look at these in the calculator, I would type them in exactly how I see them. X plus 8 squared and x minus 4 squared. Okay, so there's x plus 8, and this one is x minus 4. There we go. So these are essentially the same, except x plus 8 is to the left and x minus 4 is to the right. So how do they relate to each other? I would say that this one is on the, so this one was left 8 and this one was right 4. So they're the same function, just shifted to separate areas. Number 13, compared to the graph of the parent function, the graph of 1/4 x squared plus 6. So we're talking about the transformation. So 1/4, that gives me a shrink of 1/4. And then the plus 6 moves up 6. Okay, and if you need to see that, you can type it in. X squared is your parent function. So here's my parent function, graphing first. And then there is my second function. So notice we went up 4 and then we shrunk our a value. 14, how does the graph of g of x equals 3x plus 4 compared to the graph of the linear function? So they gave you a graph here to graph it on, but if you have a calculator, I would just type it in. So I'm going to say negative 3x plus 4, and then the linear function, the linear parent function, is just y equals x. So this is negative 3x plus 4, and the red line is my parent function. So the first thing I notice is that it's reflected because it's flipped, and that's because of the negative sign. Okay, so it is reflected. The next one is it's less steep or it's steeper. Okay, so when I think of steepness, I think of which one would you fall off of faster. So I think that if you're on the blue one, you'd fall off faster. Okay, so that'd be it's steeper. And number 4 says it has a smaller y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept for the parent function is 0, 0. So unless this has a number that's smaller than 0, that's not true. So looking at my blue one, this has a y-intercept of 1, 2, 3, a y-intercept of 4. Okay, so no, it's not smaller. It's actually greater. So the only thing that it could be are 1 and 3, which is A.